we have that going. I think it's going to be a little bit of a small group today, and we'll, you know, give a couple more people some time to log in and to come on. Again, you can type questions in the chat. Because this is kind of just the first week of things, you know, we're just jumping in. We're jumping in with what we think is fun. We're jumping in with what we hope you want us to talk about and do. But today I posted a like a poll to ask about what you want to talk about, what you would prefer a time and day to be for this. And if it, maybe it's just a matter of you're like, yeah, I'd really rather just watch the video and then ask questions later at my convenience. So we want to do what you want and make it valuable to you for sure. So just let us know. You know, it's like we're here for you guys. So today we're going to jump in with nutrition, and nutrition it's just one of my most favorite topics, and it's one that I get a ton of questions about. And so I was kind of reviewing some nutrition information today and kind of looking over how there are a lot of studies out there about what clients want when it comes to nutrition from their veterinary team, as opposed to maybe what they feel like they get. And it's one of my favorite areas in terms of just being a cat coach, because there's so much around nutrition, and I don't think we get enough time to talk about it in the practice. And I think that, you know, it's an area that we really need to focus on because it's foundational. So, hey, Seti, we can put them in either places. I don't know I guess I don't know the difference between the event feed. Like I like the chat works, but also like there's a place for you to ask a question and then it'll pop up for me that there is a question. But I've got the chat up, and I think that's as good as anything else, for sure. So if you're on your phone, don't hesitate to kind of, like I know Megan's on her phone and we may have some other people calling in. Don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask a question. I put everybody on mute when they log in just so that it's not like crazy feedback noises and things like that. And I'll address all the questions out loud as they're being asked so that you don't have to actually be looking at the screen if you don't want to be. So, all right. Well, I think we'll get jumping in here. It's 2 after, so we've got a few minutes for people to be coming in. But overall, because we've got so much to talk about, I'm just jumping in. I'm going to tell you guys too, I'm really excited because this is our first event. I did cat eyes. I did my cat eyes because, you know, it's a cat event. So I've got cat eyes for you. I'm all dressed up because I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited in general about the Mighty Networks platform. We're excited to hear your feedback about that. You've gotten an email from Kristen to talk about how you're receiving it, what you like, what you don't like, what you're confused about, how we can improve it. Again, this is about you guys having a good experience learning from each other, having a place to like just ask questions and make sure that we're addressing them. So the first thing, my major thing when it comes to nutrition is 2 things. So one, again, it's foundational. So the foundation of health is nutrition. And so no matter what life stage or disease process, we want to support it with nutrition. And that's even health, right? So if we are in a healthy life stage and just a really average place, then we really want to focus on a balanced diet, right? So there is no point in time, no point in disease process that we aren't talking about nutrition. So when we go to the veterinarian, we talk about your vitals, right? And you guys know that as like people, that vitals are temperature, pulse, respiration, right? So you go to the veterinarian, you don't go to the veterinarian. It's such a force of habit. You go to my doctor, I call him a veterinarian all the time. He's so good about it, but I'm always like, oh, you know, I hate coming to the vet. And he's like, well, good news, Becky, you're not at your vet. When you go to your doctor, they take your temperature, they take your pulse, they take your blood pressure, you know, they count your respirations. Those are the vitals, those are your baseline health points, and we do the same thing in pets. Well, we argue that there is a 4th and a 5th assessment that needs to be added to vital assessments in every exam, and that's pain assessment and nutritional assessment. So there should be 5 vitals taken at each and every veterinary visit. And if your veterinarian isn't bringing up nutrition to you, bring it up to them and just say like, hey, we've never talked about nutrition. This is what I feed my cat, or, let them start the conversation, but bring it up so that they know that it is an area that you have an interest. A lot of times the problem is we just don't have time for everything. And a lot of times, unfortunately, you go into the clinic and we dominate the conversation so much that you don't really get a good opportunity to ask a question, and except for that whole like closing, so do you have any questions? And it's not like a really open, like, okay, so what questions can I answer about your cat? Like, if you could improve anything in your cat's health or behavior or life, what would it be? And those are the questions that we really need to be asking, and the way we need to be asking, and the way we need to be planning to answer them in order to be giving you what it is you need. And so, like I said, I was looking at this research, and it was talking about how pet owners trust their veterinary team, but they feel like it was like 16% of the time that they felt like they were actually getting specific recommendations, but that specific recommendations are really what they want. And to be in defense of the veterinary industry, probably about 10-ish, 12-ish years ago now, there was like a terrifying event in the veterinary industry where like almost every single food out there popped on this salmonella list, or the toxin list. And it ended up, pets were dying. They were going into kidney failure. It was all of these trusted food brands, all of these food brands that we had recommended for years and years. And it really felt like there was nothing safe. Like, we felt very responsible if we recommended a food that ultimately popped up on this list. And the truth is that, and I mean, animals died over this. So I really do feel like there was a shift at that point. The other thing is that foods are like, there's a new one on the market every single day. We don't research them all. We don't research the ones that are available in the pet store. We research and know about the therapeutic diets in our clinic, but we don't really pay attention to foods as much as like ingredients and nutrition as an umbrella. So when you come into the clinic, we can talk to you about, well, your cat needs protein and they're an obligate carnivore. Although I would challenge, if you ask your veterinarian what makes them an obligate carnivore, they would likely not be able to tell you the exact answer, which for you guys is the fact that cats don't actually store and process nitrogen the way that dogs and people do. So because protein is amino acids and nitrogen, they don't have the ability to store it. So it kind of has to be constantly provided through the chemical makeups of proteins and how they're processed through the system. And that is kind of really the point. In other words, it's not about carbohydrates hurting them. It's about them not being able to sustain, as well as like their liver doesn't adapt. So dogs' livers will adapt long-term. The liver enzymes will adapt long-term to not getting a high protein diet, whereas cat liver enzymes will not. So those are the reasons why cats are considered obligate carnivores. Not because carbohydrates are bad for them. In fact, what we know is that proteins are very often made into complex carbohydrates through, the marrying of vegetables and, plant-based foods. So I'm not saying cats are omnivores. I'm saying they're obligate carnivores. But I'm also not saying that fruits, vegetables, plant materials are bad. Carbohydrates are bad. And corn is not always the filler that people sometimes think it of because of the really high amino acid profile. There's a really high amino acid profile in corn. What tends to happen with this whole mindset of being an obligate carnivore is we label any plant material as bad, and we say in the wild cats wouldn't eat plants. And then some people argue like, well, they would likely eat the intestinal contents of a rabbit or a mouse that could be filled with grass or corn or seeds, and that is sort of how they meet their herbivoric, omnivoric type needs. And I don't think it's really so much about needs, but what it is about is diverse amino acid profiles. And the reason that I talk about, care about, and want diverse amino acid profiles is because we are talking about proteins. Absolutely. I will talk about pea protein. That's a tricky one. A pea protein in just a second. Great question. So if you think about it, proteins are what the hair, nails, portions of the skin, in terms of the fact that like all of our cell membranes, all of our ligaments, all of our tendons, pretty much everything in our body has protein in it. Even our blood, even our plasma, all have proteins, right? So because of this, we need really diverse proteins. We need really diverse protein profiles. And so that's why we want to present diversity. And that is also the other reason that you may look at a food and see a plant or fruit or vegetable base ingredient and you think, why is that there? So Seti, as far as pea protein goes, it is just like any other protein. And so this is a good segue into that. It is 100% comes down to its digestibility. So pea protein has a very high nutrient profile. It is a carbohydrate as well. So this is where people are like, grain-free. Well, like grains and carbohydrates are not the same thing. So you can still have carbohydrates in your diet without having grains. And we can talk about the whole grain-free thing a little bit here too. So again, with a pea protein, I think it's great, but my suggestion would never be that your cat is like pea protein as the main source of protein all day, every day for the rest of their life. So what we want to do is offer as much diversity in the protein profiles as we can and ensure that the proteins that are in there are high quality and fully digestible. So, it's interesting when we talk about like converting calories for our pets. As compared to people, they're a little bit lower. So when you say like calories per gram of protein, calories per gram of fat, calorie per gram of carbohydrate, they're a little bit lower in animals than they are in people. And the reason for that is because they have smaller intestinal tracts that move faster and there's less absorbability throughout the time frame. So things go through. It's also kind of why they can eat raw meat and not necessarily get salmonella poisoning like we would, because the food doesn't actually stay there and their acids and their enzymes are different to make that not be, a major problem, of course, if they eat too much of it. So all that said and done, we want to make sure whatever protein we're giving them is high quality, and we want to think about diversity. And that doesn't mean you have to switch their food up all day, every day. It's just that you want to look at foods that have a maybe a diverse protein profile. And so this kind of goes into like homemade diets, raw diets, where if you look at the ingredient profile or if you are cooking it, I'll have people say to me like, I cook my cat, they get chicken and, yada, 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 right? Because I'm not knocking any of the ingredients, but I'm like, as a rule, always. So for example, with, with our pets, we cook some chicken, we cook some turkey, we cook some ground beef, we cook a very diverse protein profile, sardines, tuna, salmon, all different proteins. So mix it up in that sense and make sure that what you're giving them is high quality. Garbage in, garbage out. So if it's like, and that's truly the thing, right? So if you think about, if you go to like a fast food restaurant and get a hamburger, what you probably know is it's like, so it'll say like all beef patty, right? Well, but it's like the lowest beef protein or like beef profile source out there, right? So it's probably some like 27-year-old, cow, like milk cow, and it's probably mostly fat that they all just kind of cook down. Whereas if you go somewhere it's a really high quality product, you have more nutrients to absorb and get more from that. cat foods work the same, and dog foods work the same, and people foods work the same. And how they're processed makes a big difference, right? So that can even be the case with the pea protein. How it's processed, we can absolutely remove nutrients. So you can take something that's really, really, really healthy and delicious and good and cook the daylights out of it to where there really are no nutrients left. So for me, with cats, we know they're obligate carnivores, but it's more accurate to say that they're obligate amino acid and nitrogen needing beings. So whatever source of protein they're getting, it needs to be high protein, high amino acid, high nitrogen. That is what makes a quality protein for a cat, not the necessarily the source. Is that making sense? Are there questions about that? Let me know your thoughts. I think there's some reactions in the bottom there that you can send me, so I know you guys are feeling it. So that's kind of it. So, and then again, it comes to the same thing with fats, carbohydrates. Quality matters. So when we're assessing quality, it tends to take us to ingredients. And the thing I always talk to my clients about are two things when it comes to ingredients that I want you to think about. First of all, let's back up. Let's talk about labeling. So when it comes to labels, when you're reading labels for your cat food, there's a thing called an AAFCO statement, AAFCO, the American Association of American Association of Feed Council Organization, something like that. Sorry, it's not off the top of my head because it's terrible when I know it's AAFCO. This one is responsible for making sure what's in the food is what's in the food. So if the manufacturer says it's this, they assess and make sure that that is correct. They make sure that the ingredients are appropriate for the life stage for which it's labeled for, but they don't assess the quality of the ingredients. So just because that statement is on there does not mean it's a high quality protein. It just means as much protein as they say is in here. It is appropriate amount for X life stage. That's all. So it could be the junkiest, crappiest protein out there, but they will still get the AAFCO statement. So to that point, the AAFCO statement is important, and I do love to see it, but it is not the end-all be-all of foods and quality. More importantly, to assess quality of a food, okay, from the labeling, we want to look for the statement of life stage appropriateness, and we want to do our research with the company, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So when we talk about ingredients and we're looking at that ingredient list, most people have this comfort level of going to, well, we want meat as the first ingredient, and that is not wrong in any way, shape, manner, or form. But what we want to think about is a couple things. We get afraid of things that sound like fillers, and people have really labeled fillers with a human trend, and so they've gotten a really bad name when they're maybe not necessarily as much of a filler as we think they are. And so, for example, the highest amount of proteins is in bone, hair, feathers. It's actually the highest, most concentrated amount of protein in animal products. And so when they say something like chicken bone meal or chicken byproduct meal, people are like, oh, it's junky fillers. Well, the truth of the matter is, this is actually highly concentrated sources of protein. And it's very similar to taking a scoop of protein powder and putting in something you're already going to eat. Because the ability to consume actual food that meets the protein requirements for a human, like for our macros, is really hard to do. So if you think about, okay, I'm gonna sit down and eat a chicken breast, like this whole giant chicken breast to only get, say, 1/8 of the total amount of protein I need for the day. Whereas if I take a scoop of protein powder, I can maybe get as much as I could if I ate 4 chicken breasts, but my stomach and my calories didn't have to go through that. So this is exactly how it works when we're talking about, Boo Kitty's playing, and so I couldn't help but get really excited because she's adorable. So this is what we're talking about when we look at an ingredient and we see something that's a concentrated form of that protein. Don't be afraid of it. Think about it as, is this a filler or is this actually a more concentrated source of protein, amino acids, and nutrient profile. The other thing I want you to look out for is ingredient splitting. So because of this bad name, this bad title, what people will do is they'll split other ingredients to push the meat higher up on the list. Because just like with human beings, when you look at animal ingredient lists, there is, it goes basically like what's the most to the least. So for example, corn, because corn's got a terrible name, they'll maybe break it up into like corn gluten meal, corn something or other, like, and they'll break it up into 3 or 4 categories. And because they do that, they're able to list it further down. But if they maybe put all those ingredients together, because let's be clear, at the end of the day, they're chicken, they would be pushed more up to the top, which I find interesting because honestly, they can really kind of do the same thing with chicken and say like chicken byproduct meal, chicken bone meal, and chicken, all ingredients together, and be up at the top. But the truth of the matter is knowing that there is a byproduct meal and a bone meal from a protein source in your cat's food is actually probably a high quality source of amino acids, more than junk if it's a high quality food. How do we know if it's a high quality food? Honestly, I'm telling you guys, there is nothing on that bag that's going to tell you whether it's the ingredient. It can be the ingredients. It can be your friend's opinion. It can be the label. It can be that, person who is an overnight expert about dog food and cat food in the pet store. I don't care who it is. Number one, there is no perfect food for every cat. There is none. What is the best food for your cat is the food they're going to eat. I don't care if I make your cat the most gourmet, healthy, beautiful, like derived from the heavens quality food. If they don't eat it, they're not going to get the nutrition. So it has to be something that they're going to eat and something they're going to accept and something that they're going to stay on. That's the best food for your cat. And then on top of it, we're going to look at life stages. We're going to look at disease processes. We're going to look at caloric intake, body condition score, all that stuff. Okay. So nothing on the bag is going to tell you. And to be fair, it is a really good idea to get super comfortable reaching out to the manufacturers of your food companies. So like, here's the thing. Tons of foods are mostly owned by like all the same companies. Okay. We have like 4 or 5 conglomerates, and then we've got, the, specialty kitchen foods. And the thing about it is they're not terribly regulated. So they can kind of do what they want and get away with it. So you don't know the quality of the food that's being made. It could be being made in somebody's kitchen and just packaged up and sent to you. So please make sure you get comfortable reaching out and ask. A lot of foods are white labeled. So it'll say, so for example, like a Rachel Ray does not own a manufacturing plant somewhere. She has a white labeled food that's produced in another manufacturing plant somewhere else. And so we want to know where the food is manufactured. We want to know what nutritional experts are on board or on the team. And ideally, they are a veterinary nutritionist. If they're not a veterinary nutritionist, they should have extensive knowledge in PhDs in nutrition. But we want to be looking for a veterinary nutritionist. The other thing we want to ask them is going to be, how do they do their nutritional digestibility studies? So here's, let your wheels turn a little bit, right? The best way to know how digestible a food was is simply to assess what comes out on the back end. So we know how much nutrients we put in the front. If we can measure the nutrients that come out on the end, we know how much was absorbed. We know how digestible the food was. Now, this is going pretty above and beyond for most companies. Like most of them don't do this, but we want to ask them how they assess the digestibility of their product. Not a bad idea to ask where they source their product, and any other relevant information. I think it's also a great idea to ask if they have, the very best quality is going to be third-party studies that they did not oversee, that talk about the ingredients of food and the quality. That being said, there are a lot of really good companies out there that are small and they don't have a ton of money for third-party studies and things like that. So call them and get the information. Any company that doesn't want to give you information is a company I would have nothing to do with. I want to stop for a second and give you guys a chance to ask any questions you might have. I'm going to take a sip of my drink because I'm thirsty. I got matching today. So all right, if you guys have questions, don't forget you can just type them into that chat box. And if you're watching this on recording, don't hesitate to send over a comment or to ask a question about something that I tell you guys here. And so when I talk about the best cat food for your cat is the one that they'll eat, the other thing I want to do is make sure that we are presenting food in a way that is appealing to our cats, that is going to help with nutrition overall. And this is not an environmental thing. Like, I talk about hiding the food around the house and the little feeder mice and things like that. I think it's a big part of nutrition. But what I'm really talking about is the kind of that accessibility. So talking about wide food bowls, so whisker fatigue, we want to make sure that the things that our cat are accessing food from is wide and flat so their whiskers don't get caught on the sides. And then there are also a lot of really great feeding sources, such as timed feeders that I really like, and puzzle feeders that can really help to sort of space out how your cat eats. We have a lot of cats who love to stuff face and then puke. And again, that's a cat who's not getting nutrition. That's a whole belly full of nutrition that didn't go in. Very rarely do we turn around and say, oh, you need to re-eat that whole can of food you just barfed. So we want to make sure our pets are getting the nutrition, one of the most important things. All right, Seti, so should we be adding in omega fatty acids to our cat's diet if they're eating a processed diet such as canned kibble? So I think omega-3 fatty acids should be in like every single diet for everything that has a spine and breathes. I'm not really sure about the efficacy for things that don't have spines. There is no such, omega-3s are so healthy and so good, and especially for our cats. One thing that we know is cats suffer from osteoarthritis, and they suffer from osteoarthritis because of, one, being obese, but two, just sort of the way that their bone structure is, and the most important thing is that we miss it in cats so much. And that's because cats hide pain. So I think omega-3s are so good. They're great for the heart. They're great for the joints. They're great for the coat. My favorite is Antinol. I cannot tell enough people about Antinol and how much I love it. Now, do you need to supplement it? In theory, no. In theory, omega-3 fatty acids are not what we would consider an essential nutrient, but we know that they have some really great health effects for our pets. Always check with your healthcare providers, make sure that it's okay, make sure that there is not going to be anything that interferes with it. But I personally think omega-3s are just a great addition there's even science that talks about the effects of omega-3s on the brain in geriatric pets and longevity. There's also some evidence in reduced seizure activity for pets on high level omega-3s. So I think that this is a really, really great thing. That being said, quality of product is everything. So there are a lot of omega-3s out there that are not going to be digestible. They're not going to have bioavailability for cats. So just taking your omega-3s, cutting it in half, squirting it over their food is not necessarily going to be the best bet, because it may not be highly digestible for them, may not be bioavailable for them, and they may not process it and utilize it the same way, because proteins are specific to a species and a being, right? And so how they break those nutrients down is important. So I want to backtrack a little bit to obesity, because there's no talking about nutrition without talking about obesity, because the fact of the matter is too much nutrition is obesity. So we get to obesity when we have too much of a good thing. And a lot of folks don't realize when it comes to cats and dogs, so with people, carbohydrates are our main source of energy. So we they carb load before big races, and we know that, really carb heavy meals can convert into sugar, and then sugar unutilized in the system is stored as fat in the liver, fat in our body. For our pets and for our cats, they can use carbohydrates for energy, but it is not their first source of energy use. And so for them, it is fats. So animals go to fats for their energy first, unlike us, which is carbohydrates. So that being said, too much proteins. I'm sorry, I said fats and I meant to say proteins, although they go proteins, fats, carbs. So this is why we're talking about protein. We want high protein diets for our cats, but high protein can be stored in the body as fat just as easily and ready as sugar is for us. And so a lot of people will be like, I don't know why he's overweight. He's got a high protein diet. He only eats canned food. He barely eats any carbs. And what we don't realize is that the way that pets utilize energy storage and the way that they create energy processing is starting with that protein. So proteins, fats, then carbs, and that is what their diet intake need looks like too, right? Protein, fat, carb. And so because of that, we want to still make sure we're sticking to caloric needs. There is, it's funny, we argue there's not a minimum protein intake need. It's an amino acid nitrogen need. So therefore, there is no magic number. Again, it comes down to digestibility and variability. And I guess it makes sense if you think about it in the fact that if you're only feeding one type of protein, then you're only giving a certain amino acid profile. And because of that, you're not going to have the other amino acids needed to properly build other muscles, other tissues, bone structure, because it's different amino acids. So for example, we use myosin and actin in our, processing with bones and our soft tissue like ligaments and tendons. So we need those types of enzymes to do that type of job. Okay, so because of that, we want to make sure that we are giving our pets the good quality, but the right quantity as well. And so that comes down to caloric intake more than anything, as well as that digestibility and quality of the brand. So if you're not familiar with your cat's caloric needs, we want to talk to your veterinarian about it first and foremost, because their activity level, their life stage, their any disease processes, things like that are going to make a big difference. But we want to get a good idea of where our cats should be. So very, very, very roughly, they say about 20 calories per pound for a cat. So a 10-pound cat would be basically looking at about 200 calories a day. That's going to include treats, everything that they get 200 calories per day. Again, I'm not saying that's how much a cat should get. I'm just saying on like a, average, very, very average. Your crazy cats out there, your Bengals who are training for hours a day and running all over the place, different story. They're like the border collies of the cat world. And then for our couch potatoes, it's also going to be a different story. So I'm trying to put like a real heavy caveat on that. But my point is obesity in cats is super, super dangerous. And from a nutrition standpoint, it is something we really want to focus on and be aware that proteins can turn to fats, and making sure that if we are giving fats, they're super, super high quality and that within the caloric frame that they need to be. We want to use calories, body condition, and food quality kind of all as a package deal to assess our cat's health. What questions? I know Megan's driving because I was questioning her and I could hear it in the background. She's probably like, I'm driving, quit talking to me. So I know it could be hard for her to come on with any questions, but I just want to stop for a second, take a sip of my drink, make sure you guys don't have any more questions, or if I can answer any more specifics. And while you guys type there, if you have any more. So the other thing we want to talk about in terms of nutrients and diet and keeping our cats healthy and happy that we haven't yet is water. So one of the reasons we love canned food is because it has a high water content. This is great for our cats because cats don't actually get the thirst cue the way that other animals and beings do. So they don't tend to necessarily feel as thirsty, healthy cats. Now, of course, with urinary tract infections, with diabetic conditions and some other, comorbidities or illnesses, they will see increased water intake and drive for thirst. But on average, cats don't tend to really have that. And so if they're not getting the water that they want from a source that they feel happy about, they have a tendency to just like, I'm not worried about it. And again, providing it through canned food is a really great thing to do. But it can be deceiving from a label standpoint. So when we look at the label, we want to look at the moisture content of the food. Now, this gets a little mathy and a little confusing. You can Google it and figure out how to do it. But basically, you have to extract the moisture content of the food to truly assess the protein, fat, carbohydrate quantity as compared to another food. So even if you're looking at 2 cans of food, if there is more protein in can A than there is in can B, but there's more water in can A than B, when you kind of dilute that out, you may find, and you remove that water out, you may find that we have more protein in this one in a more concentrated form. It's a little confusing. It's hard to explain in a really good way, but take a look at it online and just understand that once you take the water out, you want to be looking what you're left with the concentrated proteins. So a really great question we got is thoughts on homemade diets. And I kind of dance around this one a little bit because I will go back to saying that first and foremost, we want variety. So if it's going to include homemade, if there's a homemade diet, we still want to include variety. Okay. For me, if you are going to do a homemade diet, you have to include a veterinary nutritionist and you have to do regular blood work. It's like that whole you can't have your cake and eat it too kind of thing. It's like if you're going to make your own diets, they have to come from a veterinary nutritionist. And you guys, there is so much scary stuff on the internet. I was looking for homemade diets and saw one that like included garlic and a couple products that are toxic, literally toxic for pets. The other thing is that you have to be making sure that you're meeting their minimal nutritional requirements. And this sort of goes back to what we were going to talk about with the grain-free diets. And part of people are like, oh, I'm just going to make my own. It is not grain-free diets that were associated with cardiomyopathy. It was, or heart conditions. It was what we call boutique diets that was associated. And that is because these diets did not have nutrient profile assessments. And so we don't totally understand what nutrient was missing and deficient that caused these heart conditions. Now, in several of the animals that ultimately had heart conditions resultant from these boutique type diets, we did find them to be low in taurine. Cats do not produce their own taurine. It has to be supplemented through diet. Dogs do produce their own, so it is sort of a suspect thing when we think about these dogs had cardiomyopathy as well, and so it's an argument that maybe it isn't the taurine. The scary part is we really don't know, but what we do know is that there's something imbalanced in these foods that seems to possibly be a common factor, and I want to be really careful about that because grain-free diets took a big hit. And the truth is that a balanced grain-free diet does still have the nutrients, minerals, vitamins that your cat needs. When you go to a homemade diet, it can be really easy to lose those elements. And part of that is because you don't have the bone meal, you don't have the bone broth, you don't have the bone material or the byproduct meals that are included that have a more diverse nutrient profile. You have strictly meat profiles. Your cats are not going to eat the bone. So because of that, you are losing the opportunity to create other amino acids in their diets. The other thing is that if it is truly homemade, you do run the risk of salmonella. I don't know if you're cooking it, but for the most part, homemade diets are raw diets. And there is some concerns about the E. coli, salmonella, and transmissible disease factors when it comes to homemade diets. Again, I'm not going to knock them because, again, there is no one right answer. And so if it's right for you, if it's right for your cat, that's fine. But I'm going to hold you to taking your cat to a veterinary nutritionist and for doing the blood work and staying on top of it to make sure that your cat is healthy. So I think we're pretty much winding down on time here. I want to answer any other questions that you have, so make sure you get them thrown into that chat box so we can make sure we're covering all those points that you guys have questions about. I will say that, It is a conversation you may need to bring up with your veterinary team, but if you are going to ask them about it, please bring them all the information you can about the food that you are feeding right now. We cannot keep up with all of the new ones that are out there. Like, we cannot. So bringing us an ingredient list, an AFCO statement if there is one, and the nutrient profile is very, very important to us being able to help you figure out in a efficient manner if that is going to be a good choice of food. The other thing is on the food, for the most part, you'll find the calories per cup. Sometimes it's in a weight form, but we are moving much toward being per measured cup. And so there's no reason you can't track the caloric intakes of your cat anymore, and really help get them on the track to not being obese and to having the perfect amount of vitamins, minerals, nutrients that they need to, you know, have those best 9 lives. So anything else I can answer for you guys? Seti, I'm happy to. Megan, if you have any other questions, you can come off of mute. We are running a poll to try to find out the days that this is best for you guys and the topics that you want to hear. Until then, I'm just running topics that are kind of top in the question list from you guys, and nutrition is always number 1. So this will be recorded. You can go back into the archives and check it out. So if you are like, oh, what did she say about that? I can't remember. If you've got friends you want to bring on to coach my cat, they'll be able to go back and watch all this information. So that's definitely, you know, something you can do. So good question about rotating proteins. Tell me specifically, because this is 100% yes, in terms of a couple things. One, I guess what I was trying to say with that amino acid profiles are getting those variant nutrients, getting those variable proteins. We want to be careful of our kitties' tummies. So if you have a cat who doesn't really do really well with changing foods, try sticking with a regular, you know, so we use a variety box that has a couple different flavors in it, but it's the same consistent ingredients and the same texture, and they do okay. If you have a cat with a sensitive stomach, this might be a little bit harder to do. And again, the rotating proteins is, again, I think a great idea to get diverse amino acid profiles, because again, that's going to make sure we're supplementing everything we possibly can in building. But again, if we're using a really well balanced food, you should have what you need. But again, it's sort of, I kind of compare it to like if you only eat carrots every day, like you're going to be eating vegetables, but you're really only eating one kind of vegetable, and you're missing out on a whole lot of benefits of the other ones. And yeah, venison and turkey, and you can kind of pick those low, the ones that are kind of easy on the tummy, like turkey. Venison is a great novel protein. And again, like my cat doesn't like fish. I've got one cat who's like strictly a beef girl. She loves beef. Then, you know, then chicken, then turkey. The biggest thing is reading your cat and knowing that, you know, it's going to be what they like. But absolutely, that's what we're talking about when we say getting that diverse nutrient profile. Getting diversity into their diet is a great thing to do, because again, we get that, again, you have to remember, proteins are metabolized into amino acids. Amino acids are the building block of the proteins that the animal actually needs. So it's like giving a gift card, right? It's like you give them the gift card of proteins, and then they take it in, break it down into what they want it to be to spend, and then into a protein that they're going to use, like new cat decor, something like that. That's how they work, and that's why they're so super important, and we talk about them so much with cats, and they are so important. You know, so we've touched a little bit on calories and veggies and label reading and profiling. What else can I answer for you guys? I'll give you one last chance to throw up another question. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope this was valuable information for you. Again, don't hesitate to ask any questions that you have as we go on through this, or if you know you get to a point where you feel like I need to change my food because I want to do variety. Variety doesn't have to be an everyday thing. It could be a monthly thing. So again, it depends on how your cat does. And also keep an eye out. The thing is that Now is the time. People are coming up, people are paying more attention to animal health, and cats are getting more attention than ever. So people are really honing in on what their needs are and providing them really specific, really great nutrition. So there are so many good choices out there now. And again, keep in mind, the very best choice for your cat is going to be what your cat eats. There's no one answer. This is an important place to be kind. We get a lot of judgment in the nutrition world, and what I find is people don't even want to bring it up because they're afraid to get food shamed about what they feed their cats. So keep in mind, no shame in your game. I will never be here to shame you. I'm here to talk to you about the pros and the cons of the options that you currently have. All right, guys, I'm going to call that it. I had so much fun. I hope you had so much fun. I'm going to be back. We'll be back next Wednesday in theory. If you guys tell me that you want a different day, you want a different time, we're going to work it out for you. And that's it. Give your kitties a kiss from me and from their coach, Becky. And I'll see you guys over in Mighty Networks until next week, okay?